Everyone, hope you're doing well. We are going to do, could you survive as a soldier in Napoleon's army? This one's been recommended for quite a while, I think. This is Survive History. Napoleon, obviously, the French general. Little Corporal has created an army, the Grand Army, and we have a video on how can you survive. Now, this is going to be interesting because this is going to talk about, you know, what part of his army, like when he was in his Italian campaigns, when he was fighting in Austerlitz, was he? What about when he went to freaking Russia? That was pretty difficult. So how are you going to survive there? So we'll have to see. Let's jump right in and see how it goes.
If you were growing up in France in the late 18th century, there's a good chance you, or someone you knew, would end up serving in the army. Under Napoleon's leadership, the whole of French society was galvanised by a constant need for victory on the battlefield. It was either that, or the country might fall.
Yeah, it definitely would fall. I mean, they obviously continuously had coalitions against them, front to back, ever since the threat of monarchies being deposed in the French Revolution. So,
France was surrounded by powerful enemies who wanted to destroy the Republic, and they decided the best form of defence was attack.
So similar to like how we've seen other videos, this is going to be a reenactment, mainly, but maybe some history dabbled between that.
Out of France's struggle for survival was born one of the greatest fighting forces ever assembled. Napoleon's Grand Army was established in 1804 from a force originally gathered for an invasion of Britain.
Oh, yeah. I think that's when they were trying to co-op with France. Obviously, France was going, I mean, I don't know if this is before or after the Peninsular War, but an invasion of Britain, think about how insane that would be. I don't know since the Romans have anyone tried to do that. I mean, obviously the Spanish Armada and maybe some other French incursions that I just cannot remember. But what kind of force would you need? You would have to have some sort of deterrent to that naval superiority which the British had. So,
In the end, it never crossed the English Channel, and instead went on to inflict crushing
so many political cartoons from this era.
defeats on the major powers of Europe in battles like Austerlitz and Borodino. But look at paintings from the period, history books written in the intervening centuries, and very recent Hollywood movies, and you'd believe its success.
Yeah, really great movies right there.
Was all down to Napoleon and his tactical genius. What about the men who did the actual fighting?
Without them, Napoleon was nothing.
What challenges did they face? Although few common soldiers left detailed accounts, we can piece together evidence from a range of contemporary sources to reconstruct their daily experience. In this episode, we're going to step into the boots of those ordinary men who lived and died serving Napoleon's grand ambitions.
If you get a bullet in the leg, an arm, you're gonna fall down.
Yeah, we've obviously done some really good history hit videos on the medieval and then post-medieval medicine. I mean, this is post-medieval, obviously, this is more modern, but can you imagine how life could change so quickly just by getting struck in the hand, even in the foot, even. It's ever changing.
Those
warfare
injuries, they often end up as mortalities.
I've been drafted into the 21e de Ligne, a living history group representing a real unit in Napoleon's army, using meticulous research to sort facts from fiction and bring the early 19th century to life.
Oh, they got horsies out too. Oh, that horsey fell.
I'll be finding out how dangerous life really was for these men, and how likely it was that you'd make it out alive.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. There's a lot of luck there's at the end of the day, obviously, there's a lot of luck involved in your mortality. In the Grand Army depends on who you're fighting. I guess it also depends where you're at. Is it the environment that's going to do you over? Is it an infection from something small that does not feel like a mortal wound? Or is it the inevitable? Is it a cannonball or a musket ball that goes right through you? All right, that was the intro.
The French army needed lots of soldiers at the turn of the 19th century. The Revolution of 1789, which culminated in the bloody end of the French King Louis XVI, did not go down well with the royal families of Europe.
No. They were threatened by this, and they were looking at France as something that could spread the fervor of revolution. Not like France was just going to go and just overthrow all their monarchs for them, but they were basically trying to show a wave of force, and especially when you look at places like Austria, Russia, Spain, Germany, Britain, all these monarchs that just don't like what's going on in Paris.
And the French soon found themselves at war with Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia.
Basically every single nation I just mentioned.
When the ambitious Napoleon Bonaparte became supreme leader of France, the number of enemies only grew.
Yeah, they didn't like him that much.
The Corsican upstart was threatening to conquer the whole of Europe, forging an empire which encompassed much of modern Spain, Italy, Germany, and Poland.
I sometimes think about, like, what if Corsica was not like French territory whenever Napoleon was born? What if anything changed?
But despite the constant need for fresh troops over these years, they didn't let just anyone in. Soldiers had to meet a standard set of requirements. Let's see if I'm up to scratch.
I'm very interested in these requirements, if they're physical, if they're genetic, if they're mental, or are they classes? Because, you know, even like we look at the Romans, like you have to be a certain class to enter up until like the Marian Reform. So I'm wondering on this.
Hello guys, I've turned up for my first day in the French infantry. I assume I have to pass some tests to actually get in, right? What kind of entry requirements are there?
So in terms of entry requirements, you have to be a man mostly between 20 and 25 years old. If you're a conscript, if you're a volunteer, you could actually
So
conscript
20 to 25 years old. Interesting.
from the age of 16 after 1806 or so.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were desperate at that point.
But you had to have permission of a parent or a tutor. Your height would not be a barrier to your entry. It just decide where you would go. So your height, you're quite tall. You probably actually end up in the Grenadiers.
Yeah, I was about to say the Grenadiers is that huge piece of people who they are formidable when you look at them, and especially with those hats on top of them, makes them even taller. 6'6" or taller.
The average height of the day was about 5'6", 5'7". So if you were around that height, you would be in the Fusiliers, which what we are. And then if you were any shorter than that, you're probably in the Voltigeurs, which are the skirmishers of the French infantry.
Very interesting. That's also, I would say, tactical. You know, the taller you are, the more real estate you take up in the field. So the more likely you're going to get shot.
In terms of any medical issues, you would have to have a sort of quick inspection by the surgeon of the regiment.
So
long
like
as
we
you've
do
got
today.
all your fingers, because you need all your fingers.
Got them.
In order to, especially these two are the most important, because
okay,
one is
yeah.
a trigger finger
Firing,
and you
yeah.
need them to bite to cartridges. And that leads us to another requirement. You need to have, especially this side of your face, you need these teeth.
That's something you don't think about, like the cartridges that you're able to utilize into the weapon.
So if
Okay,
you,
that's to
because
bite off the
biting the
paper, okay,
cartridges, yeah. So if you were of conscription age and you didn't want to be conscripted into the army, you did have a lot of cases where they would physically maim themselves to avoid the draft.
Yes, that is true, and probably so often than not, you see people avoiding the draft for, whether it be they don't support the war, they don't want to go, they're scared, there's so many reasons, right? Draft dodgers is what we call them in the United States, but wow, I can't imagine the toils that you would have to go through to avoid the toils of war.
Another thing, you're not married, are you?
I'm afraid so.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, you can't be in the army. You can't.
Wow, that's actually quite honorable, I would say. I wouldn't think that. I actually would not think that.
Okay.
You can't be in. Yeah. You can't be in the army if you're married at this time.
Wow,
That's interesting. Why?
didn't know that.
There's a psychology of you've got something to desert to.
I see.
I'm sure some of these might lift right after a couple of the years go by.
Yeah.
Desertion in the French army is always a problem, right from the start of the Revolutionary Wars right through to the end of the Napoleonic Wars.
Perhaps one reason so many soldiers ran for it was because they'd been forcibly dragged into the army as conscripts. At least once a year, French men between 20 and 25 drew lots to see if they'd be packed off to war.
Just like a draft.
Detailed physical descriptions of new recruits were taken to aid the gendarmerie in hunting down runaways. Soldiers who deserted might face a punishment known as the bullet, where they were chained to a cannonball and required to carry out hard labour. In the most serious cases, you might be condemned to death by firing squad, or, as it was sometimes known, having your hair washed with lead.
Not fun.
We talked a little bit about conscription. If I'm conscripted into the army as opposed to coming in as a volunteer, are you treated slightly differently?
The only way you're treated slightly differently is that if you're a volunteer, you do get an extra francs worth of pay each month, and that lasts until the first 4 years of your service.
Wow.
You're able to choose the regiment you join as well, aren't you, as a volunteer? I think if you're conscripted, you just get sent wherever you're sent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So volunteering, you're joining whichever army you're volunteering for. Whereas,
Well, that's at least convenient. So if you don't want to be told what to do, you put it on yourself to tell them where you want to go.
conscription, you're
better.
Unless you can ride a horse, you will probably be conscripted into the infantry.
Oh, that's another prerequisite if you want to be in part of the cavalry.
And that will be, depending on where you live, you'll be conscripted into a certain regiment and be sent to their depot. Now, for example, our guys recruited from modern-day Belgium and the Netherlands, they would be sent to the regiment's depot, which was in Jülich, as it's called today. Back then it was called Juliers. It's a German town today.
Okay.
That was the depot of the regiment until 1814, when it got taken over by the Allies.
Got it. So you get there, and presumably that's the point at which you get given your uniform.
And did you have to buy your uniform, or was it part of being in the army?
The idea that French soldiers were always as well turned out as contemporary artworks suggest is a bit of a myth. As well as shortages during wartime, there was plenty of corruption among military suppliers and contractors. One French regiment recorded receiving a shipment of boots with cardboard soles.
Ali.
And even when smart parade dress was available, it might not have suited everyone.
Pour cet uniforme, un homme doit être bien bâti, bien fait. A man of 20 is not yet formed. Nay, we were joined by conscripts who were under 19. These accoutrements gave them an absolutely silly look.
The stereotype of the
Interesting. So yeah, like you said, like people, they're gonna start to lower that age. The age of 20 is just like I guess a guideline, but they're gonna start lowering that age, especially when people are needed, because hey, guess what? We're not just being attacked by 2 countries, we're being attacked by 5.
French Napoleonic soldier is the blue uniform, the shako which you're wearing with the bright, shiny brass plate. Didn't necessarily reflect reality for the vast majority of the time.
It's a really nice uniform, though. I will say that.
These are expensive. These cost a lot of money to make. Soldiers,
The dyes.
if you're wearing it every day, day in, day out,
Oh yeah, the dyes.
they're expensive.
And then think about all the metal that are part, like the buttons, the belts, everything.
To replace, with that in mind, your greatcoat would be what you would wear the vast majority of the time. You'd wear these on parade, you'd wear these on special occasions, and generally on battles, yes, you would wear these, but not necessarily all the time. Inclement weather, rain, cold, actually sometimes if it's incredibly hot,
I don't see a lot of them with gloves, you know?
the greatcoat can
When did gloves become part of it? Or is that just not meant for everyone?
actually help keep the heat off you, because you actually wear another smaller jacket underneath the Habby Long.
Maintenance of whatever uniform they received was also a constant headache for soldiers. There was a lot to keep clean.
There is 33 individual brass buttons on this, every single one of which needs to be polished. On this, there is another 12 individual, very nice, bright, shiny brass buttons.
And think about every single battle, every single skirmish, this is going to... I mean, the mud, the blood, like sweat, and anything and everything to get it dirty can happen quickly.
Again, all of which need to be polished.
Yep.
The shako that you're wearing under that nice cover, there's a nice briny brass shako plate. Again, all of which needs to be polished to a wonderful, nice shine.
The belts as well need to be polished.
Belts need to be whitened.
And underneath the cover here, you've got your black lid for your jabern, your cartridge box.
Yeah.
That needs to be, polished as well. Your shoes polished. So, and the soldiers would do it.
One thing I find fascinating about...
I wonder how much that mattered when you were, I don't know, trekking on from battle to battle, or is this more like at camp?
These uniforms, these soldiers not much consideration was given to sort of gymnastic exercise, was it? These uniforms were designed to be restrictive because soldiers were meant to stand still. That was the kind of ideal at the time.
Yeah, warfare was very different in 1804 than 1914. And that's obviously why World War I was such a disaster for so many people, because the evolution of fire rate, the evolution of technology made this type of warfare pretty obsolete. And I guess the lines, the volley fire, there's so many reasons for doing it this way, but it's quite old-fashioned once the 19th century progresses into the later part of the 19th century.
When we're talking about the style of warfare, it was very much line formations. In terms of any exercise, there was dancing and saber practice. That was the exercise that you generally did. In the French army, you're marching a lot.
Yes.
So...
What was it, 30 kilometers a day they were expected to march?
On average.
I mean, you think about the Romans, did they do similar numbers like that?
Yeah, during the quickest campaigns, like the Austerlitz campaign, I think Davout's corps marched something like that, 30 kilometers a day.
Obviously, the art of war of Caesar and so forth was studied by Napoleon, as well as Frederick, as well as Alexander.
Half of his corps didn't make it to the battle because they were exhausted, but some of them did, and helped turn the tide of the Battle of Austerlitz.
The combined weight of kit and weapons carried by regular fusiliers was around 25 kilograms, and even more for grenadiers. It was also expected that soldiers would wear their haversacks into battle. Little wonder then that any items considered unnecessary to survival were often left on the side of the road.
So much personal possessions that you just can't bring, and you're a new man in the army. Your individuality does not matter usually. Is that a gourd?
The French soldier had to carry pretty much his entire life in his pack, and one of the packs looked like these. This one weighs about 11 kilos. He's got his greatcoat on the back there, and in that would be all of these items. So you'd have your parade dress, spare pair of breeches, a nice pair of gaiters there. You'd have a spare pair of boots, hobnailed boots, plus all of the equipment that you needed.
Oh, you got like cleats, or what do you call it? Well, they look like cleats, how they have those little nubs, spikes. I didn't know that they had that. I mean, I guess that makes sense, especially with the terrain they'll be trekking through.
Clean them because soldiers need to polish their boots. A couple of linen shirts. These ones are quite rough, pretty uncomfortable. A summer linen waistcoat. bit more comfortable, keeps you cool. That can go under your jacket. And then a lot of equipment here, which was for basically keeping yourself and your gear clean. So things like this. This is not a whip
It's not a whip?
for torturing people. This is for beating your clothes to get the dust.
Well, you learned something new.
And the clay pipe powder, because the same clay that was used to make these pipes was used to clean the jackets. So this was used to beat it out. You'd have other things. So soldiers would carry all of their money with them. But once they were paid, they had to pay for their own repairs. So all of this kit was technically owned by the emperor, not by the soldier themselves. If they did have any spare money left over, well, it might go on these. Now,
Playing cards for gambling?
you might see with this pack of cards, it's got a king on the front. From 1792, packs of cards like these were actually banned because the French Revolution obviously
Yeah, because they didn't want to see the monarchy.
got rid of the monarchy.
Yeah.
But by the Napoleonic period, they were back in fashion. Napoleon himself was obviously an emperor. Many of his marshals were kings across Europe. So that was fine again.
That makes sense.
And then otherwise, you've got things for personal care. So you've got a little mirror, a little comb for getting rid of bugs.
I'm sure a razor has to, you got to be able to shave.
Soldiers were pretty much eternally affected by lice. They might have carried a toothbrush. We know Napoleon brushed his teeth. Not sure if French soldiers did. They might have used a twig or something like that. A little knife, many uses. And everything else here
Do they use a knife to shave or do they have a razor?
is for cleaning weapons and equipment. So a little bit of steel wool here for cleaning and polishing weapons. All of this stuff.
It's crazy to think about all our luxuries that we have today and then look at what they're having to use in the 19th century.
Here because soldiers had a lot of time to kill and they needed to keep everything clean.
With their uniforms
It's also a sense of pride, you know, to keep your uniform clean.
issued and bags packed, infantry recruits were subjected to at least 3 months of intensive drill training. They were taught the basics of marching in step, how to move as part of a larger unit, and crucially, how to load and fire their musket.
Les officiers nous permettaient pratiquement aucun répit. Nous avons dû répéter 100 fois les positions « garde à vous » et « repos ». We had to learn the march step, 2 feet in length from one heel to the other, 76 paces per minute. That's what the sergeant kept yelling at us.
76 paces per minute. Wow. So is one step a pace? That's fast walking.
Hey guys, I'm going to be late for training, but just a quick request to subscribe to the channel.
Just go subscribe to Survive History. I think this is our first video ever doing Survive History.
Leave us a comment, hit that notification bell. I'll see you in a bit.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, we're here for some musket training. The weather's not doing what we want it to, but you're protecting your musket right now according to the French drill regulations, right?
Yeah, so this is a manoeuvre which is called armes sous le bras gauche. So this would be done when it starts to rain.
So water doesn't go down the barrel, obviously.
The objective is to keep the lock protected, which is protected underneath my left arm
Ooh, that too.
pit, and also to make sure that no water gets down the barrel. Inclement weather can cause a tremendous amount of misfires.
Yeah.
That's such a small detail that matters so
And
much.
less reliable.
A
Than,
lot less
modern
reliable,
firearm, I
and the
guess.
more muskets that are less effective, the less effective the volleys of the battalion.
So I guess commanders probably wouldn't be keen to fight in this kind of weather.
No, if they had to, then they would have their soldiers holding their muskets like this as much as possible.
Okay, well, let's go through the loading process. Is it fair to say that the French musketry didn't have a great reputation, but the French musket did? They thought it was the best in Europe at the time.
So the French musket, the French infantry musket, as we typically call it,
Charleville.
colloquially it's called a Charleville, but this is a bit of a sort of Americanism because they got shipped so much of them in the American War of Independence. This musket is, there's a reason it was copied by so many, because, I mean, for a start, the bands which hold the barrel to the stock are very easy to take off, so it's very easy to take off for cleaning and maintenance. It's also a very sleek design. The Brown Bess was more about quantity rather than quality.
Okay, so mass production, like easy to mass produce these is what he's saying. That's very handy when you have thousands and thousands of conscripts.
Well-drilled British soldiers using the Brown Bess were capable of firing 3 rounds a minute. But the French weren't far behind.
So to start the loading process, I'm going to be at shoulder arms, or porte-armes in the French army. The first order is charger douze-tombe, charger arme. So I bring the musket here. The lock is just below my breast level, my nipple level, and my thumb is ready to open the frizzen. The order comes, ouvrez le bassinnet. I bring my hand behind the stock down to my cartridge box and open up my cartridge box and grab hold of a cartridge. Then the order comes, déchirez cartouche. That's when you bite and spit off the paper. Amorce, this is the only time you look down and pour just enough powder.
So that's the gunpowder. So the cartridge box gunpowder, you pour it. Okay.
Into the pan. Fermez le bassinnet.
What is it?
Then you bring your arm down here. L'arme à gauche. Cartouche dans le canon. And pouring the powder all the way in. The ball in real life would have gone down at this point as well.
Yep.
Tirez la baguette. Now the baguette is literally...
So does the cartridge paper go down with it?
Yes, baguette, yeah. Because the word baguette is French for stick. Bourré.
Ah, that makes sense. Yeah, stick bread.
All you need is about 2 taps. You don't need any of this.
Yeah.
Just 2 quick taps so you can hear it go home. Remettez la baguette.
Fix.
And then the final order. Feu.
So that's a blank, obviously, because there's no musket ball in there. But okay.
Having seen the expert do it, now it was my turn to take a shot.
A blank
At least
shot.
I didn't have to aim at anything.
Arm. So bring this arm and there, twist the gun towards you, and then bring it around. Bring them there. That's right, that's right, yep. Then cock it.
I wasn't supposed to look, was I?
Not really.
Okay.
Jus. That's right. Feu.
So he didn't have to do all the what do you call it? The loading and so forth, but still works.
Quite a blast in your face, isn't it?
Yeah.
Think about that, like times 100, all that smoke carrying across the battlefield.
So I once read, Matt, that for every 500 balls roughly that were fired in a Napoleonic battle, perhaps only 1 would be a fatal shot. Is that
Wait, what?
that were fired in a... So I once read, Matt, that for every 500 balls roughly that were fired in a Napoleonic battle, perhaps only 1 would be
No.
a fatal shot. Is that true?
It's probably not far off the mark in terms of killed. But if you get a bullet in the leg, an arm, some part of the body,
Those can still become infected, right?
you're going to fall down. You're going to be what we call hors de combat. You're going to be out of action, essentially. And, the fatalities compared to the injuries that you see in the Napoleonic period, there's far more battlefield injuries than mortalities. But, of course, when you get those injuries, they often end up as mortalities through infection,
Gangrene.
disease, wounds getting infected, and people not surviving amputation, which was the most common sort of, if they couldn't get the ball out safely and extract
Yeah, they couldn't probe it out. Ugh.
it, then you were going to lose a limb, which was very common.
Although a single musket ball could undoubtedly be lethal, commanders knew their best chance of victory was to confront the enemy with as much firepower as possible. Under Napoleon, this led to some quirky innovations in the drill manual, as different methods of formation firing were tested in battle.
Okay.
Okay, so James, fine body of infantry you've got here. You're about to go through, I guess it's a fairly unique tactic that the French would use, firing in 2 ranks. the third rank passing the musket forward.
Yeah.
Why did they use this tactic particularly?
They use this tactic to put shock into the enemy. So basically, what would happen is the first two ranks would be firing, while the third rank was loading and passing
It keeps them going that way. Yeah, good mobilization.
a loaded musket to the man in the second rank. So you got like a little
Assembly line.
I could say like a machine gun going down the
Right, okay.
ranks. So if you think about 100 or so men in that front and second line, you'd be like, doof, doof, doof.
That's not like new either. You know, in the what was it? Was it the 30 Years' War? We saw a lot of that start to pick up as well. I don't know if it was what was his name? The Swedish general. I can't remember his name, but the Swedish general. I think he may have. I don't want to say started that, but started to revolutionize that. Yeah.
So it's essentially not letting up. If there's
It's not letting
cavalry
up.
coming in, there's no gaps in your fire for them to
Yeah.
sort of exploit that kind of thing.
We believe that Marshal Desai used it at Marengo when he turned up to the battle late. The battle was already lost. Napoleon had lost the battle. Marshal Desai turned up, and they used feu de Duronc, which absolutely broke the Austrian lines
Right.
and won the
okay.
battle.
The morale must have been just insane for the Austrians to be at that point of the battle and then have that happen to them. That might have, that crushed their morale.
Okay, so quite effective then.
Very
So
effective.
not as fun for the guys in the third rank who are just loading and passing forward, but never mind. Right, we're going to let you guys show us exactly how this is done. So take it away.
Feu de Duronc, peloton, arme, commence le feu.
Firing in two ranks allowed all the muskets in a platoon to be used with
So the fire rate is much more. I mean, the velocity to fire rate. I mean, it's there. This is to combat the British three every 60 seconds. So I don't know what would be the fire rate on this, like in terms of how many times that one could fire. Probably like 4 or 5 times every 60 seconds or something like that.
without the front rank having to kneel down, which was thought to slow down forward momentum. The French had experimented with all 3 ranks firing at once, but there was a real risk the men at
I
the
mean, hearing loss has got to be a thing too, right?
front would be shot in the back of the head, which was far from ideal.
Peloton, roulement.
That was great, James. So our enemy infantry are scared witless now.
I wonder, does height matter at all in this formation?
From the feu de Duronc.
I would think the shorter people would be up front.
What happens now if they decide to get a little bit cocky? They're coming in for a charge. How do you react to that?
So basically what you do is when you got to very close quarters to the infantry, you'd give the order to croiser le bayonet, which is basically 1-2 manoeuvres at eye level. And as you got close to the enemy, you are, in the drill book of the French 1791, you can fire from the hip.
Okay.
The musket is always loaded. There's no ifs. The musket has always been loaded, so you can fire straight into your enemy. Usually the enemy would have ran by then. One of them would have broke. There
Yeah, there's a point of no return.
was very, very little hand-to-hand combat in the Napoleonic Wars, because who'd want to get stuck with that?
Suicidal, right? And I can imagine
It's kind of like horses not wanting to charge into an enemy line, and except for you're a human, you also don't want to do that.
you're not going for accuracy there. It's the sort of the last moment possible to
Yeah.
take that shot, just to essentially break that charge up.
Firing from the hip was also a dangerous business.
Hip fire.
If troops were packed closely together, there was a real risk your musket could ignite your neighbour's cartridge box.
Oh.
Again, not ideal.
Now I'm able to let the front rank show you how you would fire from the hip, if that suits.
Let's do it, James. Let's
Okay,
see what would
brilliant.
happen if you've got some Austrian infantry coming straight at you.
Croiser le bayonet. Commence le feu.
Doesn't seem that formidable, but I'm looking through a camera. This is a reenactment. There is no, you know, yeah, it probably was a lot more, oh, when you were there.
Once training was complete, French troops would soon get used to the hardships of army life. Young conscripts were almost inevitably subjected to a gauntlet of initiation ceremonies, hazings, and general mockery by older soldiers.
Nothing's changed. Hopefully some things have changed.
Newcomers were also expected to grease the pot, which meant buying their comrades meals and drinks.
Je suis fatigué surtout de voir les pauvres conscrits tourmentés, volés et humiliés. You cannot imagine how bleak was the fate of those unfortunate children at that time. If I recounted everything they had to bear in the way of thefts and sufferings, people would believe it an exaggeration.
Wow. I mean, you're going to get taken advantage of if you're vulnerable.
We also gained some insight into the experience of French troops from the colloquial language they used.
So like the language they used, like their army, to their army friends.
We find with many periods of history, the Napoleonic Wars give us some great and memorable slang phrases, and I've got a few in here. So the first few describe older, experienced soldiers or veterans. So one I've got here is dur à cuire, which means hard to cook. Something like tough as old boots, tough guys basically. Also a vieille moustache, an old moustache, because only certain ranks and men of experience were allowed to wear one.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, I know his bodyguard, like, famously, notoriously had those huge mustaches. Grenadiers we saw had those, so I'm wondering,
They also apparently referred to the Imperial Guardsmen, the elite troops, as les immortels, harking back to the classical world once again and the
like the immortals of, like, Persia.
bodyguard of the Persian kings. The regimental eagle, obviously one per regiment, that was the thing that everyone had to rally
So
around,
important.
was affectionately called l'oiseau, the bird, or le cuckoo. There were some great nicknames for enemy infantry, and I'm pretty sure you can work out which nations are being referred to here. So you've got les Godins, or les Kaiserliches, that's the British and the Austrians. And some of the terms give us an insight into more mundane aspects of soldierly life. So
What's going on, Max?
things like the word they used for beef meant something like hardwood. The term for fleas was la mie de pain, or breadcrumbs, and that just gives us an idea of how common it was for
Breadcrumbs? Golly. That's kind of weird, man.
soldiers wearing coats like these to be covered in fleas and lice, basically. There were also numerous ways that they described being hungry, and in fact, despite Napoleon spending a lot more money on keeping his troops nourished than his predecessors, starvation was still a massive problem in his army, particularly on campaign. There were also some inventive names for other groups within the French army. So
It's funny. It's funny listening to these different names because this is stuff that's not covered ever in history. What's going on, Swedish historian? Now, I'm glad he's got the translations, because otherwise I would have been totally lost.
the well-heeled cavalrymen, the cuirassiers, were called gilets de verre, so steel vests. I'm sure they were called ruder things as well. French artillery was affectionately called le flûte à grosse bec, the big-mouthed flute.
Although regular infantry weren't trained to use cannons, they were well aware of the damage they could do. Napoleon
Yeah, I mean, think about it. A cannon can upset your entire line just because, one, duh, and then two, the psychology of the warfare that you're portraying. Especially think about, like, I think about what on Waterloo, when you have the massive line of cannon and artillery, which of course Napoleon was most famous for because he's an artillery commander before this. Just the formidable amount of mental warfare that artillery does to an enemy line, especially closer they get. By the way, Max, I have a select list of videos that we have we're reacting to today. Is in the description of this live. And by the way, if you're watching this after the fact, yes, we do these live streams every Saturday now. Well, at least for now. We'll see how this goes. But anyway, if you're watching this later on YouTube, how you doing? We did this on a live.
Himself was a master of artillery, having learned his trade at the École Militaire in Paris. He was also pretty ruthless. At the Battle of Austerlitz, he ordered his cannons to smash a frozen lake as it was being crossed by the retreating Russian army.
Right, and I mean, that's portrayed kind of fun, almost like in the Napoleon movie by Ridley Scott. Very much a movie with a lot of critical opinions on it. I think it could have done more, but it's meant for more of a mainstream audience, so it's meant for more theatrical, a dramatic and theatrical showcasing. But is that interesting? I don't know how much the frozen lake, hitting the frozen lake with cannonballs really did I don't know how much damage it really did, especially if you watch the movie. It just obliterated the Austrians, but I don't know.
Condemning those on the ice to a watery grave. There is, however, absolutely no evidence that he turned his guns on the pyramids.
Yeah, he says that because of the Ridley Scott movie.
Can we talk a little bit about the loading process? How do you go about
Look at that little small cannon.
loading a cannon like this? This one's a little bit smaller than perhaps there would have been on the battlefield.
This one's actually a 2-pounder. The
Interesting.
French, at the beginning of the war, the smallest was a 4-pounder.
So this wasn't even like, I get, this is obviously a reenactment, so they're not going to use probably the same material. So the smallest they had is a 4-pounder. I'm guessing they had a 10-pounder or a 20-pounder.
The French tended to have more 6s and 9s.
Okay.
And later on they went on to the 12s and 24s.
Okay, so that's how we're going. We're going in that. So 6, 9, 12, and 24. I'm guessing the 24s were the massive ones.
The British tended to have slightly smaller. Obviously, they've got to travel with them even further.
A well-trained French artillery crew would be able to fire around 2 or 3 rounds per minute, lobbing iron
Similar to like the British with their musket fire.
into enemy ranks at anything up to 1.5 kilometres.
So first off, what he's doing, he's taking any remnants of an old cartridge that may still be in there. And as you can see, that's like a giant corkscrew. Then to make sure there's no burning embers, because the last thing you want to do is put another charge inside when you've got a burning ember in. Okay, so that's made that all clear.
So that's quite similar to what you might do with a smoothbore musket at this point, right? You have to clear out the barrel to make sure there's no fouling inside.
That's correct. It is exactly the same, just on a bigger scale, really.
And like I said, this is a 2-pounder, so half the size of what the smallest size would be in the Napoleonic Wars.
Next, the cartridge is going in. We're actually using a paper cartridge, but quite often it was made of cloth.
Ready? Dang.
All he's doing there
Dang, that's half the time for the whole loading right there.
is he's making sure that the actual charge is into the rear, to the breech of the gun.
It's funny because the other guy, when he was showing like loading the actual musket, he's like, you don't have to do what that guy just did. You just got to do 1, 2. That guy, they got to connect. They got to align on that.
And now, in order to actually ensure that the flame can actually get to it, I have to pierce that bag, which is right here.
So interesting, these little like small things right there, because otherwise, how would you know?
And there was different ways of priming. You had tubes, you had loose powder. I'm using loose powder.
So that's so the spark goes from, make sure it has that connection of gunpowder from the top through into the...
That's correct. So once you light the top, that flame literally goes into the cartridge. You would have shot in front of the cartridge. Once the charge is ignited, there's a large expanse and volume of gases. They push the ball straight out of the barrel.
Seems simple
With
enough.
the cannon ready to fire, it was time for me to get out of the way.
Ideal. a little. I don't know what all that noise was. That's pretty good for a 2-pounder.
So we've just seen that even a very small cannon like this one can make a very big boom, basically.
Yeah.
What types of cannon do the different nations sort of use during the Napoleonic Wars? Are they all very similar?
That's correct, they are very similar. It's mainly the calibre, the actual sizes that seem to change. Wellington, his army, the Royal Artillery, they go for accuracy. So they can hit a particular target at any particular time. However, they were then targeting all different guns to different locations. Wellington, he really didn't like his gunners.
Right.
Why? Is it because of a class? Does he have like some sort of classism or something? I've heard that so many times, but maybe is that just like rumor? Or is that true? So he said the British go for more accuracy. I'm guessing the French go for fire rate and overwhelming.
Whereas Napoleon, obviously, he served in the artillery of France.
So he has like, he's got a step above everyone just because of that.
With the academy, and he understood all of his daughters, as he called them. So one of the tactics he would have is he would want to break up the infantry, so he would have all of the guns aim at a particular area and blast a way through. The cavalry could then go through and do their job.
So basically he makes a hole for the cavalry.
What kinds of different shots would you get as a gunner? I know obviously that we're not firing any cannonballs today, but they had lots of different kinds of shot that they would use for all kinds of horrible purposes, wouldn't they?
That's correct. On land, the guns, they could fire just a solid ball, which is commonly known as a round.
The round shot, and then is it called the volley shot, where you have like multiple of them?
Shot. You could have exploding shell, which most people know as a shrapnel today. You've got grape.
So like, is that where you have like all the shrapnel inside that per se, like nails and so forth?
You've got all.
Oh yeah, grape shot. That's what I was thinking of. Grape shot.
Sorts.
I see. We often see in films, don't we, when a cannon is fired at a body of men, it essentially explodes on the ground when it hits there. Is that true, or was it?
No.
Was it more kind of rolling through and sort of taking people's legs out?
The main ambition is to get the ball just to bounce just in front of the infantry.
So it bounces. Oh yeah.
And then bounce up into the men. The shells can explode, and you can have a ball which is hollow. It's got a fuse. As it's lit, you'll fire it above the heads of the infantry. The fuse gets ignited as it's coming out. Once it's above the infantry, it then explodes.
Wow.
It wasn't only different ammunition, but types of trajectory that could swing a battle. During his first command at the Siege of Toulon, Napoleon found
of course, he got to start
a way to subdue the defenders despite the small number of artillery pieces at his disposal.
And cannon, they don't only fire straight at the enemy, they can fire up as well. Mortars starts coming during this period?
That's correct. If you want to get over the walls of a castle or other fortifications, then...
Of course, artillery's always been a thing. Not really, but, you know, it's been a thing for, you know, like 600 years.
Mortar's perfect.
Is it true that he would often send his cavalry in, make the enemy form square, and then it would present a nice big target for his...
Oh, that's actually so smart.
It does. Artillery love infantry when they're formed square because they're large target and very easy pickings.
While there wasn't much an infantryman could do about a high-speed cannonball, they did at least have some effective tactics for dealing with their other nemesis on the battlefield, cavalry. Not that it would have made a charge of heavily armed horsemen any less terrifying. On the defensive, Napoleon effectively deployed giant divisional squares against the mounted Mamluks in Egypt.
Such an interesting campaign was that Egypt. Of course, he goes all the way to Acre at one point, so that campaign is super interesting.
While in attack, he became adept at making cavalry and artillery work together. From light lancers and uhlans to armoured cuirassiers, the French cavalry was the envy of Europe.
Really?
Here comes the cavalry. Right, John, we just saw you in action there. That was fantastic. What?
So you best believe you got to be trained on a horse to be able to be a part of this group.
What I always think about
So that almost makes you have to be higher society because of, I don't know, just depending on who you are. Maybe if you're a farmer and you deal with horses, but I imagine like the cavalry people, they have to be, you know, they have to know their way around a horse.
Napoleonic Wars, artillery, infantry tactics have come on so much, but cavalry is ultimately being used the same way as it's been used for centuries, right?
Centuries, millennia.
So yes, they use the cavalry in the same way, so they would exploit gaps, be able to move around the battlefield quickly, a lot of reconnaissance and that type of thing, but they still, when it came down to it, was a hard charge with the sabres into the enemy to give them a good fright.
Because a horse like this, it's a pretty powerful, it's the tank of the day, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, so he weighs about 800 kilos, so that coming at you at 40 miles an hour.
I'm American, I don't know what 800 kilos is.
He's going to certainly knock a few soldiers backwards.
And so cavalry, was it
I would imagine like 600 pounds.
ultimately about getting in amongst formations once they're
Maybe not that much.
broken? It's quite hard to charge at a line of men who are standing with their bayonets pointed at you.
Yeah, ideally they were primarily used to exploit gaps. So you're looking to be able to catch the infantry off guard, whether that...
And obviously, historically, cavalry has always been utilized as like something to turn the enemy, especially on the flanks. You can really expose the flanks with these horsemen, and it's just like we said before with the artillery becoming psychological warfare. This becomes psychological warfare.
That's ambushing them from cover, or using that with combined arms, so you can force infantry to do certain activities and form square, so that then the cannons can have a lot more effect.
They all work together.
Shooting direct lines.
Napoleon once wrote that cavalry is useful before, during and after the battle, which is hardly surprising.
I mean, you obviously use them also to chase down retreating, routing enemies.
Audacious cavalry charges had all but won him two of his greatest victories at Eylau and Friedland.
And you've got the same.
I would say maybe, I don't know, 6 months from now, we should do the epic history videos once more. The epic history videos of Napoleon, ever from Toulon to the Battle of Paris, or actually through Waterloo as well. I mean, we've done Waterloo a few times, so I don't know. But definitely the epic history, one of my favorite series was the epic history Napoleonic Wars. We got to do that again, maybe 6 months or so from now. Just a fun thing to revisit. We've already reacted to all that, so if you're hearing me say that for the first time, you've never watched that, search it up on our channel and go watch it.
Is that your main weapon that you're going to be using?
So they use the sabre for when they're up close and personal, and then they also carried carbines as well for sort of light infantry tactics. So some of the dragoons and the French chasseurs could dismount and fight on foot.
When you dismount, though, where does your horsey go? Does it go behind you? Does it flee? Do you care where it goes? Whose property is the horse? Is it your horse on behalf of the army? Is it your horse by itself? Is it the army's horse? I don't know.
So that allows them a lot more versatility. They can get to other parts of the battlefield quicker and dismount and fight if necessary.
And some French cavalry are still wearing plate armour, essentially, aren't there? At least breastplates and helmets. This type of cavalry,
Like cataphracts, like small cataphracts.
not so heavily armoured.
Yes.
Oh wait. He means the person, not the horse. Oh.
So this is a light cavalry uniform. It's the first chasseurs. Heavy cavalry was still using armour and stuff like that, which is very, very effective in battle. When you are fighting on the battlefield, a lot of what hits you is something that's coming from behind.
What's going on, Brady? How you doing?
So the French heavy cavalry with their breastplates and backplates was extremely effective.
And often you see infantry forming into squares as a kind
Why did this war start? Which war?
of countermeasure against cavalry. Saw it happen quite effectively at Waterloo. Why does that work?
So it provides a good blocking tactic for the cavalry. Cavalry want to get in and around the sides. When infantry form square, it allows them to face the cavalry with their bayonets and prevents you from being able to move around their flanks or rear.
A staggering 150,000 horses were required for Napoleon's most ambitious campaign in 1812.
The horse breeding stock was probably the highest ever been in 1800.
When he ordered a vast multinational force to march into Russia. 600,000 men
Yeah, 1812 then. That's, ooh.
and 30,000 wagons made it the largest invasion force ever assembled at the time. But despite a major victory at the Battle of Borodino, and the fact that his army succeeded in occupying Moscow,
Yeah, ooh, look at that image right there. Such a telling image. You can see, like, ooh. Castle in the background. Just kind of like you don't know where the Russians went. This is called, what is it called? Burnt earth, scorched earth. This is the scorched earth tactic that they become famous for doing. Ugh, how the whole world would look different today if something different was. So Jonathan, today, by the way, guys, I'm talking to chat if you're watching this on a replay after it's been uploaded. But and by the way, we do these on Saturdays. But anyway, Jonathan, what we're doing is in the description we have 6 videos selected. I've selected 5 from recommendations and 1 from myself.
the great adventure soon turned into a living nightmare for the soldiers and animals of the Grande Armée.
Now we know that hygiene in French camps was pretty bad.
Yeah, we already talked about the lice.
Latrines were little more than trenches dug a few meters from the tents. Washing your hands, it wasn't really recommended. There was no toilet paper, so people would use moss or leaves. Washing clothes, that wasn't something that happened regularly, and neither
You got to find a stream.
was washing your body. You'd also be sharing a bed with another soldier, so anything that he caught, you were getting as well.
That's not fun. And then is the disease, the thing that hurts and kills so many more people than war does. Ugh, can you imagine? And then if it's contagious, my God.
There's a common misconception that the freezing Russian winter killed off most of Napoleon's army on the retreat from Moscow.
Right, the summer did more actually, and the disease was ugh.
With temperatures so bone-chilling that tin buttons supposedly turned to dust.
I think that's part propaganda by Russia, though, to kind of like build up their cold, you know, I guess like don't invade us because you'll die in the winter type thing.
But this can't be the full story. Well over half of the army had already been wiped out by the beginning of November 1812, before the winter cold truly set in. And it was primarily by a louse-borne disease called typhus, which spread
Typhus fever.
easily in the cramped marching camps.
Bourgogne s'endormit sur une natte de roseau et fut bientôt réveillé par l'activité des poux. Finding himself literally covered with them, he stripped off his shirt and trousers and threw them into the fire. They exploded like the fire of 2 ranks of infantry. He couldn't get rid of them for 2 months.
What is he talking about?
All of his companions swarmed with lice.
Oh yeah, that lice.
Many were bitten and developed spotted fever.
Oh, the lice carried the fever.
Spots of gangrene appeared on men's fingers and genitals before signs of pneumonia and delirium set in. It must have been a horrifying way to go. Starvation and desertion also decimated the army as it limped its way back westwards, harassed by the enemy and denied food and forage by the Russian scorched earth tactics. It's estimated that fewer than 1 in 6 who set out on the campaign made it home.
That's insane, man. Like so many brothers, fathers, and sons perished in this. But all because Russia decided they didn't want an economy to just go to shit. because it was, I believe it was the continental system that they had agreed with Napoleon to be a part of. So Britain would be choked out like an anaconda plan, but for Britain, they said, "Nah, I'd rather not be able to starve."
Having been defeated and exiled by the Allied powers once, Napoleon threw the dice for the final time in 1815.
Yeah, 100 days.
Escaping his island prison on Elba and drawing together the battered remnants of the Grande Armée for one last stand. The experience of the few remaining veterans who had now survived decades of bloody campaigns must have been highly prized.
James, I've been through training now, obviously. I've taken part in the battle, and I've actually grown my own moustache.
Were you allowed to grow? I mean, I guess since he was technically a grenadier, he was told he's tall enough to be a grenadier, so maybe so.
So I was wondering if I was ready for promotion to the Imperial Guard. Ow.
No, get on sentry duty.
That's fine. Where are they going? Those are redcoats. Oh, so this is like the reenactment part. How do you know if you're supposed to fall down? Hey, that's probably the worst squares I've ever seen in my life, but you get a pass. The horse. No. No. Yo, that's kind of dangerous. Oh no.
The Battle of Waterloo was to be a step too far for Napoleon and his army. A combined force
So this is what it is, a reenactment of Waterloo.
of British, German, Dutch and other Allied troops under the Duke of Wellington held the French at bay for long enough for Marshal Blucher's Prussians to deliver a decisive blow.
But they weren't faring that well prior to the Prussians even. I mean, they did okay, but they did not do anything like they thought they could have.
The Imperial Guard, Napoleon's immortelles, couldn't turn the tide this time.
La mort s'est glissée sur nous de toutes parts. Des rangs entiers disparurent sous la mitraille. But nothing was able to stop our march. It continued with the same order as before, with the same precision. The dead were immediately replaced by those who followed. The ranks, although becoming fewer, remained in good order.
Wow.
Talking about casualty rates of the Napoleonic Wars is extremely difficult because the records simply aren't that detailed. However, it's estimated that around 1 million French soldiers died during the First Empire. That's 1805 to 1815.
And then that doesn't even count the 10 years prior to that.
It's thought that about 15% would have been carried off by disease. That's 3 times more than died during combat. And you have to remember that mortality rates were high at the time anyway. Lots of those men would have died whether they joined the army or not. Ultimately, it depended on where you were sent. We know that a huge proportion of the Grande Armée was wiped out in a single campaign.
The Russian one.
If you were sent to Russia, there was a good chance you weren't coming back. For everyone else, you had a reasonable chance of surviving your term of service.
The Peninsular one was kind of interesting. But the Italian one's probably, I guess you have the best likelihood of survival if you were in Italia or you were staying at home.
Even if you ended up fighting at the Battle of Waterloo. And it looks like I've got through my crash course unscathed.
Thank you to the French 20.
What a video, guys. This was a fun video to react to. Survive History. I think it was our first Survive History video we've ever reacted to. There's like plenty others on there. They're all pretty long, so we'll have to choose different days to do that. But look, to be a French soldier, you had to go through it. How different was being a French soldier than being an Austrian soldier, a British soldier? Maybe he has videos on that, so we'll have to check that out. But overall, what a fun video to kind of like understand, like not only what happens at in the battlefield, but between the battles, at camp, in training, and so forth. So a lot to go that goes into it, whether it be the preparedness or the training. But nevertheless, appreciate you guys as always. Peace out.